In my last video, I talked about a sub-scene in part of Act 4, Scene 4 of Romeo and Juliet, which performers struggle with, directors struggle with, which almost nobody wants to perform in the way the writing itself suggests it be read. The one where Shakespeare kind of resists, where performers resist the script's idea of what the play is, and in which Shakespeare resists our idea of what the play is, where the text fights back against the way we want to read it. I want to talk now about another section of about 50 plus lines at the end of Act 4, Scene 4, which basically nobody does. In this sequence, and here we should also know your editors have added these act and scene divisions which don't actually mean scene changes. Act 4, Scene 3 probably just floats into Act 4, Scene 4. Juliet has been lying on that bed since she took her kind of sleeping potion, and then the nurse discovers her, and that she's had this soliloquy, and that's been very painful and affecting. The nurse discovers her, seemingly dead, very painful, very affecting. We have this strange moment where the parents and the nurse and eventually Paris all kind of regress in their language and become much more fake and hard to sympathize with. And then this happens. There's a stage direction your editors added. It's in there. Enter three musicians. Then the clowns come. There's a scene with musicians who've been hired to play for Juliet and Paris's wedding, who are around, who kind of comment and start punning on this. And Peter, the clown, comes in and starts to make jokes. There are even jokes with the nurse before she leaves. There are jokes. At this moment, we've gone from intense affective sympathy and identification with Juliet. We've gone to through some fairly effective sympathy and identification with the nurse, the poor nurse, finding the body of this young woman whom she loves, apparently dead, to this strange moment where it has to step back in a perhaps Brechtian way from the grief of the parents because it's too ornamental, because their language is too artificial and doesn't feel real enough. And then the clowns start to joke. I have never seen this on stage. It does not exist in any major film. No one does this. Maybe for time, maybe for casting, but also because we have no idea what to make of it. I know it has been done. About 30 years ago, I was in a library reading reviews of major performances of Romeo and Juliet in the previous decade because I know how to party. And it turns out that in Chicago in the 80s, they did this scene. And the reviewers lost their minds. What on earth are they doing putting those musicians in there cracking jokes right next to Juliet's dead body? Because there's no way to clear Juliet's body from the stage. The musicians are there with Juliet lying on her bed. Yeah. Um, and the critics are enraged at what the director has done to mess with Shakespeare and interpose this terrible, ill-conceived thing with the joking. What the director has done is do what Shakespeare instructed, has actually done what's written in the play, which no one else does. Again, as with the weird scene that precedes it, I would say this little scene also suggests that we need to expand our idea of what this play is and maybe abandon some ideas of its sincerity. These characters, these musicians, are not at all affected. It's a job. They showed up for a gig. They showed up for a gig to play a wedding, and the bride is dead. The last words of this scene, the last words of this extraordinary sequence that started earlier on which highlighted with Juliet's kind of final soliloquy is, "Come, we'll in here, tarry for the mourners, and stay dinner." The second musician says, "Let's hang out. We'll just hang out and we'll stay around and we'll get a free dinner out of it." That they care not, they're not affected particularly by Juliet's apparent death. It's just a drag, and they're making it professionals and to hang around and cadge a free meal. We also have Peter, the clown, coming in and saying, "Sing me a merry dump, a merry dump." A joke, ha ha ha. Ha ha ha, genre confusion. A merry dirge, what would that be? I don't know. We're in a play that confuses comedy and tragedy all the time. So a merry dirge is probably perfect. Here the clown is really speaking for the entire project of the play. No one knows what to do with this scene. No one knows what to do with a scene. No one today wants to do a scene where we step back that far from identification with Juliet, where we stop caring, where we introduce characters who don't particularly care. Not that they hate Juliet, they're just indifferent to her. The idea of being indifferent to Juliet's death strikes us as dangerous for the entire project of the play, but it apparently doesn't strike Shakespeare and his coworkers and his original audience that way. Apparently, it's part of the original project. It's just a very different play from the one we think it is.